Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook.
Hello, and that's it. Red light is rolling. So this is a video as well as a podcast. So if you obviously listen, lots of people like listening to the podcast because they can listen to the podcast whilst driving or whatever you're on the way, doing other stuff. But we do put the recordings onto YouTube, and sometimes when we are remote, we record. Not that there's much here to see other than me and in my new home office. As you might have mentioned to you before, we do live about an hour, 3/4 an hour away from flagship HQ. So occasionally, we work from home. I work from home. So I've got a good setup here at home. I'm fortunate enough to have a partner who works from home permanently. So spare room is an office, and we've just moved, so that's why it looks slightly different, probably from the last ones you've seen. So I think I've probably got slightly. I didn't whisper this in case she listens, but I think I've got slightly less room than I had in the old setup. But it's a lovely place we're at. So as you can see, I'm on my own. So Mike again on my own. For those of you who have been listening to this in sequence, you'll have understood that with the last few podcasts, we've had some really great guests on, and we've covered some fantastic topics, and we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback from those podcasts. So we were joined by James and Tom, and we even had a cameo from our very own JC. In our office on the last one as well, which was great. So, but because it's kind of holiday season and people are very, very busy, etc., I'm on my own. So, great. So I thought what I'd do is just use this as an opportunity just to mop up one or two bits and pieces from guidance or legislative point of view. Things that these ones are some of them are fairly old. They've done the rounds a few times, but they do keep cropping up from time to time on the chats and the people I speak to generally on a day-to-day basis. So the first topic I'm going to cover off on this podcast is Section 88. Now, some of you might have heard of Section 88 and wonder where it gets its name from. So Section 88 is basically, it gets its name, it's derived from Section 88 of the Road Traffic Act 1988. It's quite easy to remember that, isn't it? 88. And that particular section of the Road Traffic Act deals with a driver that may be not in possession of a driver's license. That's a little bit different to somebody who's not in possession of the entitlement to drive. That's not suggesting that anybody who hasn't got the entitlement to drive should be driving, but this is somebody who's not physically has their driver's license. So that license may be away being processed, a new a renewal application, for example. Technically speaking, I've just moved house, so in fact they sent mine back really, really quickly. I don't know if that's indicative of the DVLA Swansea in general, or whether it was just a simple address change and there wasn't anything really to do. But that, literally, I can't believe it. I did it, and literally 2 days later, it was on my doorstep. So that's obviously one way of thinking. Well, maybe for a couple of days I didn't have possession of a driver's license that had my correct address on it. But so Section 88 deals with that. It deals with somebody who's not actually physically in possession of their driver's license being able to produce it to a police officer on demand. Remember that it's not a legal requirement to carry our driver's license in the UK. However, we must be able to produce it if asked to do so by a police officer. Now, normally, if we haven't got it on us, they give us a 7-day producer. So but we have to produce it at a police station within 7 days. So that's how it works. That's a Section 88. So Section 88 can then, with a vocational driver, can sometimes be used where the license is renewed, and that sometimes that renewal is subject to maybe some questions to be asked in terms of the medical side of things. So a Section 88, I've heard people call the Section 88 a medical exemption, and that's a bit worrying because it isn't a medical exemption at all. It merely covers you for that period of time where you haven't physically got that license, because it's either your application is being considered by the DVLA. So make no bones about it. If a driver has been told by a medical professional that they shouldn't be driving, then they shouldn't be driving. It's as simple as that. And a Section 88 isn't going to last you that long. They've got a year on them anyway. And if you've got a situation where you've got a driver that's having some issues with getting their license back from the DVLA, even in the worst of the periods that we've just gone through, I think a year would have been way more than, even given the delays that we've had recently. So I'm not quite sure what those delays are like now, whether there is still a huge backlog with the DVLA. I get mixed messages when I ask people. Some people say, no, it's from what we know, it's back to pretty much back to normal. Other people say, oh yeah, still a nightmare. So just put that out there. It is not a medical exemption. It is merely to cover that period of time where the driver may not physically be able to produce a driver's license because it is away being processed in one shape or another. And that may mean that it's being subject to looking at. Remember, it's not a doctor that actually takes your license away from you or takes that category entitlement away. That's done by the DVLA medical branch on the doctor's report. So the doctor reports on Form D4, and subject to that report, you may have to undergo some treatment or some tests or whatever it is to retain your category entitlements for your vocational license, or even your car license in some cases. So it's not a medical exemption. It's just to cover that period of time when that license is away. So, but essentially the key thing is, and I think even the DVLA say on their own leaflet, on their own information on the website, the best person to decide if you can drive when you haven't got that, your license is away being processed, it is you and your medical practitioner. So I know we don't always get to see doctors these days, or we certainly don't always get to see the same doctor, do we, more than once ever? But it's really important to let your doctor know, if you're a driver, a vocational license holder, that that's what you do for a living, because that may change. One thing I'm going to really recommend to the transport professionals out there is it's a publication called Assessing Fitness to Drive, a guide for medical practitioners. Now, we ain't medical practitioners. Some of you might be, but we're not medical. We do the first aid and what have you here, but we're certainly not medical practitioners. So you might think, well, what on earth's that guide got to do with a transport manager? And I would never, ever suggest that you try to counsel a driver on their medical condition, because you're not qualified for that. However, it's a really, really good document to have up your sleeve, metaphorically speaking, so that you can you can understand some of the and it's the other thing I will say about this guide as well, it is incredibly well written. It's not written in Latin or doctor's language. It's written so the layman can understand it, but it gives us a really good sort of, not say basis of discussion, but something that we need to be aware of. So Assessing Fitness to Drive, a guide for medical practitioners. It's on the .gov website. Check it out. It's really a really good tool to have in your transport manager arsenal. But as I say, comes with a caveat that you are not medical professionals. Don't try to sit there with a white coat on and a stethoscope around your neck and try to talk to your drivers as if you were a doctor, because clearly you're not. Who knows? However, so that's one thing I wanted to talk about today. The other one, it's a bit of a double-edged one. This one, it's about maintenance providers. And we've all got very excited recently, haven't we? We've covered it off on podcasts previously. We've all got very, very excited about the Guide to Maintaining Roadworthiness and the updated version of the Guide to Maintaining Roadworthiness. Tom and James covered it off brilliantly with us on a podcast, which, if you haven't, go and look in the back catalogue, because if you wanted to know about the Guide to Maintaining Roadworthiness, it's a really, really, really good podcast there. Won't go over that old ground again. It suffices to say it really has sharpened everybody's views on maintenance providers, particularly when it comes to the roller brake tests or the loaded roller brake testing for a start. And it's coming. I've seen this on one or two of the Facebook boards as well. It's sort of brought to a light. I think something we probably all kind of knew, but how much maintenance provider. I mean this in the nicest possible way, because the job they do is highly skilled, highly technical, but how much they actually know about operator licensing, and should they know about operator licensing, and the demands of the Guide to Maintaining Roadworthiness and the DVSA, the role of the DVSA, enforcement sanctions policy, and all that kind of thing, categorisation of defects, yada yada yada. How much they know about those kind of things? Well, I think number one, they really, Guide to Maintaining Roadworthiness. If you can't find it, if you walk into your maintenance provider, plug time. We would be more than happy to do an audit on any maintenance provider or workshop. Pete's the workshop guy. We'd be more than happy to do an audit on that, and I've started my working life in a workshop. So, but I think an easy test for you, would be to walk into your maintenance provider and try to find the latest copy of the Guide to Maintaining Roadworthiness. If your maintenance provider hasn't got a copy of that, then we're at ground zero, really, aren't we? So. I would expect them to have the latest copy of that, and I would expect most of the staff, or if not all of the staff in the maintenance provider, to be aware of the Guide to Maintaining Roadworthiness. So I think that's as a read. In terms of general knowledge of the operator licensing, one positive thing I'm seeing personally is, again, it's very personal. And I may just be in a not saying lucky, but it is lucky because they're very nice people. A fortunate position of seeing these people on courses, but I'm seeing an awful lot of my transport manager cohorts being populated by people who work on the maintenance side of things. So I would say in a cohort of, say, 15 people on my transport manager cohorts, I would say that I get at least one, if not two, or more even in some cases, people sitting on the course to become qualified transport managers who actually work in the maintenance sections.
Hello, it's Shani from Flagship Partners. We are really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. If you need expert advice or training for your fleet business, make Flagship Partners your first choice. We are really excited to announce the launch of our Transport Manager Academy. With expert development for fleet leaders, we offer fully accredited initial Transport Manager CPC training, CPC refresher, and operator license awareness training, as well as mentoring, support, and professional development beyond the qualification. Our vision is to develop elite fleet professionals.
So be that for main dealers, or be that for independents, or be that for companies who have their own maintenance providers. But that tells me that I think the industry is waking up to the fact that they do need that kind of level of knowledge. It'd be interesting to see what you good people think. So drop a comment in, or get in touch with us and tell us what your thoughts are on that. But I think that they do need to have that sort of. They have to understand where we are coming from as transport managers and transport professionals and operators. What we demand being quite a strong word, but what we are legally obliged to do and what we're expected to do as operators. And if that's not being supported by the maintenance providers, then, and it may be not being supported by the maintenance providers because they don't understand what is needed and what is necessary. interesting. But as I say, my personal view on that is I'm really, really chuffed to see more and more people coming through and doing that. And certainly on OLAPs and refreshers as well. But on the transport manager exam itself, from a maintenance provider's point of view, that they're only really so they have to learn about an awful lot of stuff that they don't really deal with on a day-to-day basis. But it's really good to see them coming through and wanting to learn more about what it's like to be an operator. On the subject of maintenance providers, I'm going to clear up something that is always rattling around, and is that our mechanics, for the purpose of being a mechanic, are they exempt from driver's hours rules, EU driver's hours rules? And the answer to that question is yes, they are, to a degree. They are exempt, but the argument here stems from the government's own guidance, GV 262. If you go looking in EU 561 2006, the legislation really doesn't make it crystal clear, to be fair. And then the government's own guidance, GV 262, is a bit wishy-washy, because if you look at exemptions, because that's kind of where you kind of expect to find an exemption when you look under the section that says exemptions. It's kind of not really there. So I'm going to do. Come prepared for this. I'm going to do a bit of a Pete on this one, if and Google it, because it's always the way to do it. So we have in exemptions, we have vehicles undergoing road tests for technical development, repair, or maintenance purposes. And new or rebuilt vehicles which have not yet been put into service. Then it goes on to say it does not apply to vehicles going to or from testing stations for the purpose of annual test. So most people will read that and say, well, that's it, mechanics they're not exempt, because it's actually saying exactly the opposite in the guidance. But it's not just about exemptions and derogations. If you go back up in GV 262, where it gives us some definitions. So in GV 262, it defines a driver, a vehicle, and then it defines goods. And it's under the goods definition that we go into what is classed as goods. So to paraphrase, it goes on to say it doesn't include ballast used for the purposes of road test of the vehicle or for an MOT or annual test purposes, providing the ballast is a non-commercial load. So that's the load, the weight that you carry for the test. And then the guidance then goes further, and it's quite specific, really. And this is remember, this is the DVSA's interpretation of the EU guidance. But it then goes on to say driving a hire vehicle for the purposes of delivery and collection, empty vehicles delivered to and from an annual test. But of course, it's got that little footnote that says you are allowed to carry dummy loads if you like. Driving a vehicle for the purposes of moving it between depots. Who ever thought? Driving a new demonstrator vehicle for purposes of collection and delivery, and driving a vehicle that's to be scrapped. Of course, it has to be roadworthy. That goes without saying. So, yeah, it's one that it gets debated quite a lot, really. Are mechanics, for the purposes of mechanicking, are they exempt? Now, there it is in GV 262. Get a copy of it, but don't just look at exemptions, because you won't find it in exemptions. But if you go up to look at the definition of goods, it's there and it's crystal clear. And they actually cleared that up a few years ago. They put that extra bit in about the DVSA's interpretation. Goes without saying, of course, and what we say to people all the time is that interpretations are only just interpretations unless it's interpreted by a court. So, even if the DVSA interprets something in a particular way, that doesn't necessarily mean it's law, because the DVSA are not the law-making body. Parliament's the law-making body. Courts will determine what is and isn't lawful. But if that's the DVSA's take on it, then I wouldn't worry too much. It's got to be the right thing, isn't it? So there we are. That's that cleared up. One more thing to clear up. while we're on it, and it came about in the early part of this week. Was it last week? I can't remember now. And it just came up in a chat, and somebody said to me, "It's about driving without a driver card, a digital driver card, driving a vehicle equipped with a digital tachograph, where you haven't got a tachograph card. You've had it stolen, it's been lost, or it's otherwise malfunctioned. Not you've just left it at home. You just left it at home. I'm afraid there's only one solution to that: is go and fetch it. Not fetch it in the lorry though. Fetch it in a car or a vehicle that's not in scope. So driving out a car. I personally, as a trainer, have always said to people that you may drive a vehicle without a digital card inserted in the tachograph machine because it's been lost or stolen or is malfunctioning. But before you drive, you must report it to the DVLA. Or actually, the legislation talks about competent authority. So we take it as being the DVLA in this country. Maybe one or two question marks about that. But but the thing is, somebody said to me the other day, really good person. Yeah, are you sure? Where's that written down? Is there anything in legislation? Is there anything in guidance even that says that you must report it before you can drive? I said, well, I've always said that, but he got me doubting, and I like to make sure that that I can back up with what I say as a trainer. I always like to make sure that I can back it up with legislation or with guidance or with written down somewhere by somebody. So that got me thinking. I had a look and consulted some other wise gurus on the subject, and effectively, no, there is nothing that actually says in either guidance or law that that you must report it before you drive, specifically before you drive. However, the guidance is crystal clear, and it says that you must report the loss or damage or theft of your card immediately. So the inference is that you would, immediately means like now. So as in, I've become aware that I've had my card stolen or it's lost or it doesn't work. So then my next job will be, before I go and put the kettle on and make a cup of tea or whatever, my next job will be to report that card. Because the word immediately is crystal clear. So isn't it? So, and if you think about it, it makes sense. If you get stopped and you're not driving with a card, and you say, well, it's lost. Have you reported it? I've even heard trainers say, oh yeah, you have to report it and get a reference off of, when you report it, you will be given a reference number, which again isn't anywhere in the legislation or the guidance. But when you think about it, it makes absolute sense. And of course you would take those steps to make sure that when or if you got stopped, and you said, look officer, I've reported it, there's the reference number, I reported it at 7:38 this morning, there's the reference number to prove it. I think that is, to me, is a sensible solution. But I enjoy it when somebody challenges me and says, I've never seen that in writing, and quite right. And absolutely, if somebody can find it in writing, don't bother looking in the legislation, EU EC 165 2014, because it ain't in there, believe me, and it's not in the guidance. The guidance does say immediately. So good luck if you can find something which an official document which says anything other than that. But the sensible solution would be to report it immediately. So that means before you go and drive. That's not immediate, is it? That's later on. So that's it. So I hope you found those sort of 3 or 4 topics mildly interesting. As always, any comments or anything you want to add or you want us to discuss on these podcasts, please let us know. And as I mentioned before in previous podcasts, we get an awful lot of people who are following us. We've got an awful lot of people who recognise now Fleet Geeks and the Fleet Geek podcasts, which is fantastic, absolutely brilliant. We love to hear it. But we get very few people leave comments or the rest of it. So please get in touch with us, either here at Flagship or through YouTube if you're watching on YouTube, or through whatever your podcast provider is. And of course, smash that like, subscribe, and comment. That's it. That's the way, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, we're also we've got another. This goes out on YouTube as well as on the pods. We've also got another. We're doing something called TAWIF at the moment. The only way is Flagship, an irreverent look at behind the scenes at the Flagship team, which I think you'll thoroughly enjoy. It's very entertaining. We've got some cracking characters in that little lot. So that's it, over and out from me. Hopefully next time I'll be joined by somebody and you won't just have to put up with me waffling on about stuff. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll speak to you on the next one, wherever that may be.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.